Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another meeting discussing the beautiful life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, last time we were still with the return of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Mecca after his trip with his uncle Abu Talib. Now the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is about 10, 12 years old, again resuming his profession as a shepherd and growing strong as a strong young man sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from any blemish, so that later on when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give him the revelation, no one can remember any bad thing about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No one can criticize his character sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected him from a very young age. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam describes different events where he, as a teenager or a young man, started thinking about just doing like all of his peers. Everyone is going to festivals, listening to music and watching these singers and dancers and doing this and doing that, drinking the wine or whatever intoxicants that they had, and doing all of the other practices that were available. And again, that was not criticized, by the way. That was the norm for young men at this age. It's coming of age, and it's how people become adults and men and so on and so forth. So it wouldn't have been criticized. Even that wouldn't have been criticized. These moral blemishes to Quraysh were the norm. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from anything that would be diminishing his character sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sayyidina al-Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, says that at a certain time there were some cracks in the walls of Al-Kaaba, so they were trying to fortify these walls before it collapses or anything like that. You know, it doesn't rain much in Mecca, so Mecca is usually very dry, but when it rains, it pours. When it rains, it's basically flooding, because as we mentioned before, Mecca is like at the bottom of a plate surrounded by mountains from all sides. So when it rains, mountains come from these hills or from these mountains down to the lowest point, which is around Al-Kaaba. So it was common, not very frequent, but it was common that it would get flooded and people cannot even make tawaf around Al-Kaaba because of these floods. And sometimes the floods would be so strong that it can affect the stability of the structure itself. Again, think about it. It was not a steel structure or a concrete structure. It was just a brick structure. They did not have mortar or cement or concrete. It was just trying to put these stones on top of each other and stabilize them the best that they could. So at one of these events, when there were some cracks in the walls of Al-Kaaba, and Sayyidina al-Abbas is the one who narrates, they summoned some of the young men and gave them the responsibility of carrying the stones for the masons to place them in the different gaps and to support the walls of Al-Kaaba. And Sayyidina al-Abbas told the Prophet ﷺ, well, in order for these stones not to affect your shoulders, take off your garment that you're wrapping around your waist and put it on your shoulder as a pad, and then put the stones on top of it so they wouldn't hurt your shoulder. Basically, the person would be totally undressed, totally naked if they do that. But again, to them, that was nothing unusual, especially if they were away from women. If no women were seeing them, among men, they said, no big deal. So Al-Abbas himself did that, and all the young boys or the young men did that. And again, the Prophet ﷺ, seeing that this is what everyone did, he just did that and wrapped his garment on his shoulder and put the stone on top of it. Sayyidina al-Abbas narrates, and then suddenly I saw him falling to his face, just falling to his face. And the Prophet ﷺ narrates and says, I felt someone punching me in my chest, a very strong punch. I fell to the ground, and that sound told me, cover yourself. So the Prophet ﷺ got up and covered himself and never resumed this practice again. Everyone was basically walking naked with their garments on their shoulders and the stones on these garments. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not do that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected him from this indecent practice. Another event, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam narrates that he and a colleague of his of the same age were watching for some sheep as shepherds, and then they heard from the city, they were in the desert, and they heard from the city some chanting and music and something like that. It seems there was a festival, and there were some indecent actions taking place in that festival. The Prophet ﷺ told his companion, I've never been to any of these festivals. What exactly takes place there? So the man told him, why don't you go and see for yourself? And the Prophet ﷺ told him, would you keep an eye on my sheep? And the man said, no big deal, I'll do that. So you go down for the night, check what's going on, participate in that, and come back in the morning, and we can take turns. And the Prophet ﷺ said that he went down, going to that sound and this music, and then when he approached, he asked, what's going on? They said, this is a wedding. Someone is having a marriage festival. So the Prophet ﷺ kept approaching, and then he says, I fell asleep, and I was awakened the following morning by the heat of the sun on my face. So basically, I missed all the action. That was the first time. So he went back, and his colleague asked him, so what did you see? He said, well, actually nothing, I fell asleep. So the following night, they heard the same thing. So again, the Prophet ﷺ asked him, and the man said, sure, go ahead, I'll take care of your sheep. And again, the Prophet ﷺ approached Mecca, trying to see what's going on, trying to participate in these festivities. And again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused him to sleep. And again, he was awakened the following morning by the heat of the sun on his face. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam read the message. He understood, it seems that I'm not destined to go and participate in these events. I'm not even going to try. And he lost interest in this fact, in these festivals. And that's again how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is about 15 years of age, growing up, strong, well respected by everyone around him, trusted. People who care about their sheep, they would give them to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be the shepherd, and he would get whatever money he would get for doing that. He would pitch in the budget in the house of Abu Talib, because again, the responsibilities are huge and there are several mouths to feed, and Abu Talib himself, not being a very wealthy person, he could just barely make ends meet. So the Prophet ﷺ wanted to pay back to his uncle for the favor that he has given him by taking him after his grandfather passed away. Around the age of 20, there was a major war between different tribes. When the Prophet ﷺ was about 20 years of age, there was another major war that affected Mecca. Mecca is a sanctuary. Mecca is a haram, which means year-round there shouldn't be any fighting there. We know that for the Arabs in general, they had designated 4 months as months of non-aggression, and what they called al-ashhur al-hurum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, إن عدة الشهور عند الله 12 شهرا يوم خلق السماوات والأرض منها 4 حرم ذلك الدين القيم فلا تظلموا فيهن أنفسكم. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إن عدة الشهور عند الله 12 شهرا في كتاب الله يوم خلق السماوات والأرض منها 4 حرم ذلك الدين القيم فلا تظلموا فيهن أنفسكم. The ayah in Surah At-Tawbah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that the count of the month is 12 months in the calendar that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. We're talking about the lunar months. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heavens and the earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designated these 12 months. Now the Arabs have selected these 4 months to make as sanctuary months. These are months of peace where there shouldn't be any fighting in the peninsula, so that travelers could travel safely, particularly for Hajj, for pilgrimage. If anyone came from any of the corners of the peninsula seeking the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to perform Hajj, They should not be threatened by any aggression or any wars or any fighting, trying to get back to Mecca and back to their homes after they finish Hajj. So the Ashhur al-Hurum were Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, and Al-Muharram, 3 consecutive months. Al-Hajj takes place on the 10th of Dhul Hijjah. So on the 40th day, about the 40th day from the start of Al-Ashhur al-Hurum. So people go to Mecca, perform Hajj, and spend some time there for a few days, and then they go back to their homes. So the extension of these Ashhur al-Hurum extend until the end of Muharram, about 50 days after Yawm Arafah. So we're talking about 40 days before Yawm Arafah and 50 days after Yawm Arafah, allowing for people to stay in Arafah and in Al-Manasik in Mecca for maybe 7 days, 10 days, however they want to stay, and then they have another 40 days to go back to their homes. And there was no place in the peninsula where Hujjaj or the pilgrims used to come from that was more than 40 days of travel. So that was enough for everyone to go back to their homes safe. And then there was another month separate from these 3 months, which is the month of Rajab. In the middle of the year, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also designated as Shahr Haram, and the Arabs respected it as Shahr Haram. Again, maybe this helped with their trades. If they want to go on a trade caravan, again, that caravan would not be affected by, at least that's a guaranteed month of safety where they conduct their businesses, meet or do whatever other gatherings that they have without the fear of any aggression or any fighting. But there used to happen some wars before Islam that used to be called Hurub al-Fijar, the wars of Fijar. Fijar comes from Fujr, something above and beyond the accepted norms, something that's rebellious against the norms and against the customs. So basically in this case, Al-Fujr in this case, or Al-Fijar in this case, was starting a war in the months that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has designated as sanctuary months and that the Arabs have accepted as sanctuary months. So they broke their own word. There was another practice also that they did in order to avoid the continuation of these months, especially the 3 months in a row, Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, and Al-Muharram. So there started appearing a new tradition by prominent people who were respected in their clans or their tribes. One of them would say, I am such and such, the leader of such and such tribe, and by my authority, by my power, I am postponing the Shahr Haram. We're going to postpone it to next year or the year after. So this year, Dhul Qa'dah is not going to be Shahr Haram. We can go and fight and attack our enemies or whatever. And they call this postponement an-nasi'. Yansa' means to postpone or to procrastinate. So basically they would postpone a Shahr al-Haram, move it from 1 year to another year. They almost did that almost every year. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala criticized this wrong practice, changing the orders and changing the rules for the months. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls this kufr. إنما النسيء زيادة في الكفر يضل به الذين كفروا يحلونه عاما ويحرمونه عاما ليحلوا ما حرم الله ليواطئوا عدة ما حرم الله فيحلوا ما حرم الله. So which means, the main translation is, an-nasi', this act of postponement or procrastination or moving the months around, shuffling the months around, ziyadatun fil kufr. It's an increase in aggression and in disbelief. That the non-believers would do it, لِيُوَاطِئُوا عِدَّةَ مَا حَرَّمَ اللَّهِ فَيُحِلُّوا مَا حَرَّمَ اللَّهِ, to change what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made halal and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made haram. فَيُحِلُّوا مَا حَرَّمَ اللَّهِ, they would allow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made forbidden. Every month, every year, basically, they used to do that for 1 month. So the Ashhur al-Hurum kept rotating over the years. Now it's very interesting that we know the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has gone on only one pilgrimage, Hajjatul Wada', the pilgrimage in the year that he sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Dhul Hijjah of the year that he ﷺ passed away following that Hajj, following that year. The Prophet ﷺ, as we mentioned, passed away in the month of Rabi' Awal, on the 12th of Rabi' Awal. So in the Hijjah of the previous, before that Rabi' Awal, the Prophet ﷺ went for Hajj, and that was the 10th year of the Hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ. Listen to what the Prophet ﷺ said in his sermon, very famous sermon known as the farewell sermon or Khutbatul Wada'. The whole pilgrimage is called Hajjatul Wada'. It was the only pilgrimage of the Prophet ﷺ, but the sermon that he gave on the day of Arafah had a special significance. And the part that I want to highlight here, later on inshallah we're going to talk about it in more detail, but the Prophet ﷺ started by saying, إن الزمان قد استدار كيوم خلق الله السماوات والأرض, which means that this year there was no postponement, there was no procrastination of Al-Ashhur Al-Hurum, and now the full cycle has come, and now Dhul Hijjah comes in the right time. They used to postpone Dhul Hijjah by 1 month or 2 months or whatever. So after the accumulation of the years, now it came a full cycle. It has been postponed by 1 full year. Now it's at the time of Dhul Hijjah. So the Prophet ﷺ performed the Hajj at the precise time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant for it to happen. إن الزمان قد استدار كيوم خلق الله السماوات والأرض. And the Prophet ﷺ reminded his people that do not go back. لا ترجعوا بعدي كفارا يضرب بعضكم رقاب بعض. Do not go back into disbelief and to the habits of the non-believers in the days of ignorance, the days of Jahiliyyah, including An-Nasi, including something else that we're going to talk about inshallah next time, that's called Al-Hums, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has abolished in the Quran and told Quraysh, do not think of yourselves as better than any other tribes. You are just like any other tribe. So wherever they make Hajj, you make Hajj. We're going to talk about that inshallah next time. But basically, we're talking about this practice of Quraysh of An-Nasi or An-Nasa'a. An-Nasa'a were the people who, on their authority, this Nasi was made. This was another bad practice of the Arabs to change what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made forbidden to make it allowable. And again, it goes back to the same concept of changing the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or changing the revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed to us. A warning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us as Muslims: do not do that. Previous nations have perished and have been chastised and criticized for these practices, so do not do that. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who يعظمون شعائر Allah, those who respect and glorify the rituals that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among them. And inshallah next time we're going to talk about that war of Fijar in more detail and talk about some of the other practices of Quraysh. Until next time inshallah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.